Welcome. I'm Alice Alicia Jones, and this is another one of my Living Consciously videos. I welcome you. I'm starting to meet a few of you who have been listening to me for years, and I certainly am very grateful for your attendance. I just passed a milestone of 1,000 YouTube subscribers, which for some people who may have millions, that doesn't seem like a lot. I'm very grateful for it, and just very, very happy to have the attendance here, to have the subscribers. Today's topic is perception versus knowing, and I'm going to start with a PBS special that I just recently watched on Nova, which is every Wednesday in the Washington metropolitan area, and on WETA, and on that's 26, and then channel 22 usually carries the same. But the important part of what they called their thing, the title of their show, they called it the deception of perception. And the example that they brought out was that there had been several tests done recently across the United States. I don't think it was across the world, where they took a dress and they wanted feedback from people as to what colors the dress was. 50% of the people said black and blue. 50% of the people said gold and white. There's no way in the world that black and blue could be mistaken for gold and white. And yet they claimed that people had gotten into such arguments with each other that in some cases it actually led to divorce, because they were so upset that they were seeing something that the other person was insisting was something else. So then they started to scientifically figure out why certain people saw this dress as black and blue and other people saw it as uh, white and gold. And they realized that it was the lighting under which they saw it. If your lighting was in a very if you saw it in very bright light, uh, a daylight, and there you would see the dress as white and gold. If you saw it in incandescent light, which has more of a yellow tone to it, you saw it as blue and gold. And at the end of the session, they brought out the dress and they said this was the actual dress, because we were just kind of like, how how could you possibly see one versus the other? They showed the dress, black and blue. And it was astonishing. But again, what, does this have to do with the way humanity operates? One of the things that I study is A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles makes a direct distinction between perception, because it says perception comes strictly from the ego. Perception comes through your filters, through whatever your beliefs are, through whatever you've been programmed to believe. Um, so effectively, versus knowing, which is like a direct download. It's I know that I know, I know that I know that I know, but I don't know how I know. So it's a direct download of information. And it was fascinating it's been a fascinating journey to me because recently I have had the experience, and this has happened like rapidly, where before it might have been months or years for me to experience something like this, where somebody will say something to me and I interpret it as hurtful. And then when I ask them about it little bit later, maybe a month or two later, they look at me and they said, "I never said that." And I look at them and I said, "Yes, you did." And they say, "No, I didn't." But put it this way, it has happened to me often enough now. This is about the sixth time. And the last two times were like just a few months apart. One was in July, one was in September. So I realized that, okay, what's going on here? Um, and I realized that I am receiving a reaction according with my expectations. The particular person that made the remark can be hurtful at times. And in the process of being hurtful, to keep the peace, I have never said anything. I've never responded to that person and said, um, in the moment, in the moment it was happening, I have never, retaliated and said, "What do you mean by that?" And the irony is that within a month or two, that person claims they never said that. And it's interesting because we just celebrated Mother's Day in New York. And whenever I made a comment to my grandson about a preference, he would say, "What do you mean?" And I thought at first, boy, that's a strange reaction to the fact that I just made a comment about a preference. What I didn't ask him is, "What did you hear?" And this show has made me, this PBS show on the deception of perception, made me realize that when the next time that he makes that comment on, "What do you mean?" I will ask him, "What did you hear?" So to get a handle on what it is that he actually heard and what he is asking me to explain again. So, um, the I think the reason that I want you to understand this is because our world is changing so rapidly that we are in a place that we are getting examples of us, that what the spirit guides want us to do, what God wants us to understand is nothing is what it seems. You may think you're you've got something going, or you may think something is happening, and it, that's not the case. I'll just bring it back to another example. Um, I know there's not much talk about it, but the apparitions of Mary in the past have always brought forth some kind of communication for the children, because it was usually children that received it. Sometimes it was an adult, um, like the Our Lady of Guadalupe, that was an adult male that received the communication from her. But most of the time it was children. And attached to every single communication that Mary came in with were messages of sin and guilt. And it finally dawned on me, this makes perfect sense. The Catholic Church promotes sin and guilt because those are two means to control you. And the Catholic Church, as well as so many of the other religions, are interested in control. They're interested in mind control and making you feel a certain way about something. So, effectively, I now recognize that if something happens to me and I perceive it as hurtful, I have to ask in that moment that it happens, what do you mean by what you're saying? And just see what the response is. I know in this PBS special, they did have another example, and this is with sound. They produced, again, the same 50-50 result. There was a sound out there, and they wanted people to say, what did you hear? The sound that they 50% heard was Yana, Yannah. Yana. 50% of the people heard Laura. Well, Laura doesn't sound identical to Yana. And yet, again, people would argue to the death that it's Yana, Laura, Yana, Laura, Yana, Laura. So it was amazing. It was an amazing show. Uh, it's on streaming. I recommend that you watch it. It was just shown this past week on Nova. So now, perception versus knowing. When you know something, you get it as a download, or you've heard it repeated so many times. It can be a lie, but because you've heard it repeated so many times, you accept it as the truth for yourself. So for you, you call that a knowing, whether it is or not. Because for you, this is why we can have this polarized effect of people that have entirely different opinions, entirely different recognition of what they call facts. If somebody has been fed a stream of lies over and over and over and over, I did a graph for myself and I proved that one lie repeated to one person and then two lies repeated to two persons, and then four lies, well, no, two and two lies repeated to two persons are four lies, and then four lies repeated to four persons. By the 35th day, that lie has been repeated 35 billion times. And what scientists have said is that you hear something six times before you hear it once, but then once you hear it six times, you accept it as gospel truth. So, one lie repeated to one person in 35 days, do the math. Don't accept my word for it, do the math, will give you 35 billion lies. Now, what if you start with 20,000 people to begin with? What if you start with 40,000? What if you start with 100,000? What if you start with these people who are on newscasts who have 20 million followers? Is it any question, or is there any uh, doubt that we as a nation can be in conflict with each other? that we can be as polarized as we are. So, all I can tell you is when you have a knowing coming into you, and that's something that you couldn't possibly know from any kind of rational deduction, then provided you have asked for spiritual guidance from the highest beings of light, that knowing comes from God. Do not think that if you're dealing with low energies like black magic or voodoo or power over, control of, that that knowing is for the benefit of all. It is not. But if you're dealing with only the highest beings of light, and it and you ask to be surrounded by the highest beings of light, that knowing will bring you an answer to what it is that you need to know. I'm going to continue this next time, um, by expanding on this theme next week. But for right now, I think it's what, 1:16. So I'm going to wrap up. And I just want to say that your saving grace as a human being is to align yourself with the highest beings of light. Because if you do not, and obviously there are those who use sin and guilt and who use God's name to promote a threatening behavior. And again, we're human. We're given free will. So we are given the right to effectively be any version of ourselves that we choose. And if you choose a version that stays in victimhood, so be it. You have that right. But are you doing yourself a favor? If you ruin your life because you've had challenges that you felt you couldn't meet? No. So, like I said, I'm going to continue on this same theme next week, but I thank you for watching, and I will see you in 1 week's time. Thank you also.